The distant whistle of the approaching train echoed across the dusty plains of Salina, Kansas, as Noah Xavier stood on the platform, his weathered Stetson clutched nervously in calloused hands. The summer of 1878 stretched hot and dry around him, but the 30-year-old rancher barely noticed the sweat trickling down his neck. His attention was fixed on the iron beast rounding the bend, carrying a woman who had agreed to be his wife based on nothing more than a handful of exchanged letters and desperate hope. Noah shifted his weight, the wooden platform creaking beneath his boots. The last 6 months had been the loneliest of his life since his parents passed from influenza, leaving him with a struggling cattle ranch and a house too quiet for one man. The mail-order bride service had seemed like madness at first, but what choice did he have? Few eligible women ventured willingly to the harsh Kansas frontier. The locomotive's wheels screeched against the rails as it slowed, belching black smoke into the clear blue sky. Noah straightened his string tie and brushed dust from his Sunday coat. His last letter from Dorothea Fleming had confirmed she'd be arriving on this train. The Philadelphia seamstress had written of her dreams for a new start out west, away from the crowded city and painful memories she refused to elaborate on. Noah respected her privacy, figuring they'd have a lifetime to learn each other's stories. As the train hissed to a stop, passengers began to disembark. Noah scanned each face, searching for the woman who matched the small daguerreotype he kept in his breast pocket. A description: auburn hair, green eyes, and a small scar above her right eyebrow was all he had to go on besides the faded image. And then he saw her. Standing at the top of the steps was a young woman, perhaps 23, with weary eyes and tendrils of auburn hair escaping her simple bonnet. Her gaze swept the platform anxiously until it landed on Noah. A flicker of recognition passed between them, and she offered a hesitant smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. But as she descended the steps, Noah's practiced greeting died on his lips. Dorothea Fleming was visibly, unmistakably with child, her condition partially concealed by a traveling cloak, but evident in the careful way she navigated the steps, one hand protectively cradling her rounded belly. Whispers erupted around them as the townsfolk of Salina took notice. Noah felt their stares burning into his back, heard Mrs. Hollister's scandalized gasp from the general store entrance. For a moment, he stood frozen, the implications washing over him in a cold wave. Dorothea reached the platform, her chin held high despite the flush of embarrassment coloring her cheeks. Her knuckles were white around the handle of her small valise. "Mr. Xavier?" she asked, her voice softer than he'd imagined but steady. "I'm Dorothea Fleming. I understand if you wish to nullify our arrangement." Noah looked into her eyes, green as she described, but shadowed with fear and something else he couldn't name. In that moment, he made a decision that would alter both their lives forever. He stepped forward, took her valise, and offered his arm. "Miss Fleming," he said, loud enough for the curious onlookers to hear, "our family starts today." Relief flooded her face, followed quickly by suspicion. "You aren't angry," she whispered as he guided her away from the platform. "We have much to discuss," Noah replied quietly, "but not here, not now." His wagon waited nearby, the 2 chestnut horses stamping impatiently in the heat. Noah helped Dorothea climb onto the wooden seat, mindful of her condition, before settling beside her and taking the reins. "I should explain," Dorothea began as they pulled away from town, the curious stares of Salina's residents fading behind them. "You don't owe me explanations yet," Noah interrupted, keeping his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "You've had a long journey, let's get you settled first." The 15-mile ride to Noah's ranch passed in silence. Dorothea seemed grateful for the reprieve, her body gradually relaxing beside him as they left the town behind. The vastness of the Kansas prairie stretched around them, golden waves of grass bending in the summer breeze. Occasionally, Noah would point out landmarks: the creek that never ran dry even in drought, the distant hills that marked the edge of his property, the neighbor's ranch visible only by the thin trail of smoke from its chimney. As they crested a small rise, Noah's homestead came into view, a modest 2-story farmhouse with a wide front porch, a large barn, and several outbuildings. A small garden plot hugged one side of the house, and a corral held a handful of horses. It wasn't grand, but it was solid and well-maintained, a testament to Noah's diligence. "This is it," he said, unable to keep the pride from his voice. "Xavier Ranch, been in my family for nearly 20 years now." "It's lovely," Dorothea replied, sincerity warming her tired voice. "Truly." Noah helped her down from the wagon, then carried her trunk and valise into the house. Inside, the main room was clean but Spartan functional furniture, plain curtains, and few decorative touches beyond a patchwork quilt draped over the back of a rocking chair. "My mother's," Noah explained, noticing Dorothea's gaze on the quilt. "One of the few things I've kept. The kitchen's through there and upstairs are 2 bedrooms. I've prepared the larger one for you. I'll take the smaller room until we decide how to proceed." Dorothea's eyes widened slightly. "You're not expecting us to share accommodations immediately?" "No, madam," Noah said firmly. "That wouldn't be proper given the circumstances." He showed her to the bedroom, freshly swept and aired, with clean linens on the bed and a small vase of wildflowers on the dresser. Dorothea's composure finally cracked at this small kindness, a tear slipping down her cheek before she could catch it. "I'll let you rest," Noah said gently. "There's a wash basin and fresh water. When you're ready, we can talk over supper." Downstairs, Noah busied himself preparing a simple meal: beans, cornbread, and the last of a venison roast. His mind raced with questions, but he forced himself to focus on the practical matters at hand. Whatever Dorothea's story, she was clearly exhausted and in need of kindness more than interrogation. The sun was beginning to set when Dorothea descended the stairs, her hair freshly brushed, and her traveling dress exchanged for a simpler cotton one that made no attempt to hide her condition. Noah estimated she must be at least 6 months along. "Something smells wonderful," she said, hovering uncertainly in the doorway to the kitchen. "Just simple ranch cooking," Noah replied, gesturing to the table. "Please sit, you must be hungry after your journey." They ate in relative silence at first, the clink of utensils the only sound between them. Finally, Dorothea set down her fork and looked directly at Noah. "I owe you the truth," she said firmly, "and then you can decide if you want me to leave on tomorrow's train." Noah nodded, waiting. Dorothea took a deep breath. "I was engaged to be married in Philadelphia. Thomas was the son of my father's business partner. It seemed a suitable match, though I didn't love him. 3 months before our wedding, he took liberties, said since we were to be married anyway, it didn't matter." Her voice wavered but remained steady. "When I discovered I was with child, I told him immediately. He accused me of trying to trap him, said the child couldn't possibly be his. He broke our engagement and spread rumors that ruined my reputation." Her hands trembled slightly as she continued. "My parents stood by me initially, but when business associates began to distance themselves, my father's shop suffered. They suggested I go to a home for unwed mothers, give up the baby, and return as if nothing had happened. I couldn't bear the thought." "So you answered my advertisement," Noah concluded quietly. Dorothea nodded. I hoped to reach Kansas before my condition became obvious. I planned to tell you the truth once we were married, claim an early birth. It was dishonest, I know, but I was desperate." Her eyes, luminous with unshed tears, met his. "I understand if you wish to send me back." Noah considered her words carefully. "When did you receive my last letter?" 3 weeks ago. "And you were already showing then," she nodded, a flush of shame coloring her cheeks. "Yet you came anyway, knowing I might turn you away." "I had nowhere else to go," she whispered. Noah rose from the table and walked to the window, looking out at the darkening prairie. He thought of his own solitude, the empty rooms of this house, the neighbors who had begun to whisper that Noah Xavier was becoming a strange, lonely figure. He thought of the child growing in Dorothea's womb, innocent of its circumstances. "I won't send you back," he said finally, turning to face her. "What happened wasn't your fault, and I won't punish you or your child for it. My offer stands: we can marry if you're willing. The child will have my name." Dorothea stared at him in disbelief. "Why would you do that for a woman you don't know, a child that isn't yours?" Noah returned to the table, his expression thoughtful. "My father always said a man's character is measured by how he treats those who need help, not by how many cattle he owns or acres he holds. I offered for a wife because I need one. This ranch is too much for one person, and I admit I'm lonely. You need a safe place, a name for your child. Perhaps it's not the romantic beginning either of us imagined, but it could be a partnership built on mutual respect and need. And if the town talks, they saw my condition, they'll count the months, Noah shrugged. Let them talk. We'll say we corresponded longer than we did, that we'd met before. Eventually, they'll find something new to gossip about. Dorothea studied him, searching for any sign of deceit or ulterior motive. Finding none, she nodded slowly. Then I accept your offer, Mr. Xavier, though I can't promise more than friendship and hard work at present. That's enough to start with, Noah said, extending his hand across the table. And please call me Noah. She took his hand, her touch light but steady. Then you must call me Dorothea. They were married 3 days later by the circuit preacher who happened to be passing through Salina. The ceremony was brief and private, witnessed only by Noah's nearest neighbor, Samuel Tanner, and his wife, Abigail. If the preacher noticed Dorothea's condition, he made no comment beyond offering an extra blessing for the health and happiness of their household. Life settled quickly into a routine. Noah rose before dawn to tend the cattle and horses, while Dorothea took charge of the household. Despite her city upbringing, she proved adaptable and determined, learning to cook on a temperamental wood stove and manage the modest vegetable garden. In the evenings, they sat on the porch, discussing the day's events and slowly, cautiously, sharing pieces of their past. Noah learned that Dorothea was the middle child of 3, with an older brother who'd died in the war and a younger sister who'd married a banker in Boston. She'd been raised to manage a household, but had worked in her father's dressmaking shop since she was 16. Developing a skill with a needle that she now put to use mending Noah's work clothes and preparing for the baby's arrival. In turn, Dorothea discovered that Noah had come to Kansas as a boy of 10 when his father sought land after the war. He'd fought off rustlers, survived droughts and blizzards, and nursed both parents through their final illness 2 years prior. He played the harmonica on quiet evenings, a talent inherited from his father, and could recite long passages of Shakespeare from the small collection of books his mother had insisted on bringing west. Their marriage remained unconsummated, with Noah keeping to his small bedroom across the hall from Dorothea's. At first, the arrangement was a relief to her, though sometimes she caught him watching her with an expression that made her wonder if his feelings remained entirely practical. As summer gave way to fall, Dorothea's time drew near. Her body grew heavier, her movements more labored. Noah hired a local girl, Jenny Wilkins, to help with household chores 3 days a week, and he took to checking on Dorothea throughout the day, leaving his work at the slightest sign she might need him. "You're hovering again," Dorothea told him one October afternoon, looking up from the tiny gown she was sewing to find Noah standing in the kitchen doorway for the 3rd time that hour. "Just making sure you have everything you need," he replied, not quite meeting her eyes. "What I need is for you to finish mending that fence before the first snow comes," she said, trying to sound stern but unable to keep the warmth from her voice. Noah's concern touched her, even when it veered toward overprotectiveness. He ducked his head, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Yes, madam," he replied, tipping an imaginary hat before heading back outside. Dorothea returned to her sewing, her thoughts troubled. Over the past months, she'd grown to admire Noah, his quiet strength, his unfailing kindness, the way he never made her feel she was a burden despite her condition. He'd been true to his word, treating her with respect and asking nothing in return. Sometimes, watching him with the horses or listening to him hum as he worked in the barn, she felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with the baby's movements. But then she would remember Thomas, his handsome face twisted with accusation, the cruel words he'd hurled at her. She would touch her swollen belly and remind herself that romantic notions had brought her nothing but pain. Better to focus on the practical arrangement she had with Noah, to be grateful for his protection without complicating matters with feelings she wasn't sure she could trust. The first labor pains came 2 weeks later, on a blustery November morning. Noah had ridden to town for supplies, leaving Dorothea alone when the initial cramping began. By the time he returned, windburned and dusted with the first snowflakes of the season, she was gripping the back of a chair, her face pale with pain. "The baby," she gasped as he burst through the door, arms laden with parcels. "It's coming." Noah dropped the supplies and was at her side in 2 strides. How long, how far apart? Since mid-morning, maybe 15 minutes now. Another contraction seized her, and she clenched her teeth to keep from crying out. I'll fetch Mrs. Tanner, Noah said, already heading back toward the door. She's helped with most of the births around here since the doctor moved away. Hurry, Dorothea whispered, fear threading through her voice. The 4 miles to the Tanner homestead and back felt like the longest ride of Noah's life. When he returned with Abigail Tanner, Dorothea had retreated to her bedroom, her pains coming faster. The older woman took charge immediately, sending Noah to heat water and gather clean linens before banishing him from the room. This is women's work now, she told him firmly. You men always get underfoot at times like these. Hours passed, the November day fading into an early dusk. Noah paced the main room of the house, wincing at each muffled cry from upstairs. He tried whittling to steady his nerves, then reading, but nothing held his attention. Finally, he simply sat on the bottom stair, head in his hands, and prayed to a God he wasn't sure was listening. Just as the clock struck midnight, a different cry pierced the quiet house, the unmistakable wail of a newborn taking its first breath. Noah's head snapped up, his heart hammering against his ribs. Long minutes later, Mrs. Tanner appeared at the top of the stairs, her apron stained but a smile creasing her weathered face. You can come up now, Mr. Xavier, she said. You have a healthy son and your wife's doing just fine. Noah climbed the stairs on unsteady legs, pausing at the threshold of Dorothea's room. She was propped against pillows, her face drawn with exhaustion but glowing as she gazed at the small bundle cradled in her arms. When she looked up and saw Noah, something shifted in her expression, a vulnerability he hadn't seen before, as if the final walls around her heart had momentarily lowered. Would you like to meet him? She asked softly. Noah approached the bed slowly, as if in a dream. The infant was tiny, his face still red and slightly squashed from birth, a wisp of dark hair plastered to his forehead. As Noah watched, the baby's eyes flickered open dark blue, as all newborns were, but with a gaze that seemed impossibly knowing. He's perfect, Noah whispered, reaching out hesitantly to touch one miniature hand. The baby's fingers reflexively curled around his, and Noah felt a surge of emotion so powerful it nearly brought him to his knees. What will you name him, Mrs. Tanner asked, bustling about the room, gathering soiled linens. Dorothea looked at Noah questioningly. They hadn't discussed names, the topic somehow too intimate for their carefully constructed relationship. That's for his mother to decide, Noah said, still transfixed by the tiny fingers gripping his. Dorothea considered for a moment. William, she said finally, after my father, William Xavier. She glanced at Noah. If that's agreeable to you. William Xavier, Noah repeated, tasting the name. A fine name for a fine boy. Mrs. Tanner stayed through the night, helping Dorothea with the first feedings and showing Noah how to change the baby's swaddling clothes. By morning, when she prepared to leave, promising to return the next day, she wore an approving expression. You've got a good man there, she told Dorothea when Noah stepped out to harness the horses for Mrs. Tanner's journey home. Not many would take on another man's child as his own. I know, Dorothea replied softly, watching through the window as Noah led the horses to the front of the house. I'm very fortunate, and he's fortunate too, getting a ready-made family. Mrs. Tanner patted Dorothea's hand. Just don't keep him at arm's length too long. A man needs to know he's wanted, not just needed. The older woman's words stayed with Dorothea over the coming days as she adjusted to motherhood. William, or Will, as Noah had taken to calling him, was a good baby, nursing well and sleeping for decent stretches. Noah proved an unexpectedly capable assistant, never balking at dirty diapers or middle-of-the-night wailing. He spoke to the infant constantly, describing ranch operations and reciting poetry as if the child could understand every word. Winter settled over the Kansas prairie, blanketing the land in snow. The world contracted to the warm confines of the farmhouse, where the three of them established new rhythms around the baby's needs. Noah still slept in the small bedroom, but he spent his evenings in a chair pulled close to Dorothea's as she nursed Will by the fire. One such evening, as December winds howled outside the frost-rimmed windows, Dorothea looked up from Will's drowsy face to find Noah watching them. an expression of such yearning in his eyes that it caught her breath. When he realized she'd noticed, he quickly looked away, pretending sudden interest in the fire. "You're very good with him," she said quietly. "Many men wouldn't bother." Noah prodded a log with the poker, sending sparks up the chimney. "It's easy to be good to him. He asks for so little, just food, warmth, and a bit of attention. And you're willing to give him your name, your protection, to raise him as your son." "He is my son," Noah said with unexpected firmness, meeting her eyes again. "Maybe not by blood, but in all the ways that matter." Dorothea felt tears pricking behind her eyes. "Why, Noah, truly, you could have found a wife without my complications." Noah set the poker aside and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "When I saw you step off that train, do you know what I thought? Beyond the surprise." He didn't wait for her answer. "I thought, there's a woman with courage, to travel across the country alone in your condition, to face a stranger who might reject you on sight. That takes extraordinary bravery. I admired you before you spoke a single word." "It wasn't bravery," Dorothea protested. "It was desperation. Sometimes they're the same thing." Noah's voice was gentle. "And then I got to know you, your determination, your kindness, the way you never complain even when I know you must miss city comforts. How could I not come to care for you?" The word care hung in the air between them. Dorothea looked down at Will, now sleeping peacefully against her chest, then back at Noah. "I've been unfair to you," she said finally, "keeping you at a distance when you've shown me nothing but kindness. I was afraid to trust again, to believe that a man could want me for myself rather than what I could provide." "And now?" Noah asked, his voice carefully neutral. Dorothea smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Now I think perhaps I've been a fool. If you're still willing to be patient with me, I'd like to try being a real wife to you. Not immediately," she added hastily, a blush coloring her cheeks. "Will is still so young and I'm not fully recovered, but soon." Noah crossed to her chair and knelt beside it, one hand gently touching Will's dark head, the other covering Dorothea's where it rested on the baby's back. "I'll wait as long as you need," he promised. "We have time." Christmas arrived with a break in the winter storms. Noah surprised Dorothea with gifts he'd been hiding since his last trip to town: a length of blue calico fabric, a tortoiseshell comb for her hair, and a tiny wooden horse he'd carved himself for Will. Dorothea presented him with a new shirt she'd secretly made from one of her old dresses, the fine material a stark contrast to his usual rough work clothes. They celebrated simply, with a special dinner and carols sung around the fire. As Dorothea nursed Will before putting him down for the night, Noah produced a small package wrapped in brown paper. "One more," he said, holding it out to her. "Though it's not exactly a Christmas gift." Intrigued, Dorothea unwrapped the package to find a small leather-bound book. Opening it, she discovered blank pages. "I thought you might like to keep a record for Will," Noah explained. "About his growing up, important moments. My mother kept something similar for me and I've always treasured it." He hesitated, "And I thought, maybe someday he'll want to know about his beginnings, how you were brave enough to come west, how we became a family." Dorothea touched the pages reverently. "It's perfect," she whispered. "Thank you." That night, after Will was settled in his cradle beside her bed, she wrote the first entry. "December 25, 1878, my dearest William, today was your first Christmas. Your father gave you a wooden horse he carved with his own hands. Someday, when you're old enough to understand, I will tell you the story of how we came to be a family, not in the usual way, perhaps, but with more love than I ever thought possible." As winter gradually loosened its grip on the prairie, the household routines evolved. Will grew stronger daily, his dark eyes, which had remained blue, much to Noah's secret delight, tracking movements across the room, and his tiny hands reaching for faces and objects with increasing coordination. Dorothea regained her strength, taking on more household duties while Noah focused on preparing the ranch for spring calving season. Their relationship continued to warm, with small touches exchanged, a hand on a shoulder, fingers brushing while passing the salt at dinner, a quick embrace when Noah returned from a long day with the cattle. They spoke more freely, sharing memories and dreams, disagreeing occasionally but learning to navigate their differences with respect. One evening in early March, as they sat by the fire after Will had been put to bed, Noah broached a subject he'd been considering for weeks. I've been thinking about expanding the house come summer, he said, sketching idly on a slate he used for tallying cattle. Adding another bedroom downstairs, maybe expanding the kitchen. Dorothea looked up from her mending. Are we outgrowing it already? Noah's pencil hesitated. Not yet. But someday, perhaps, we might like a brother or sister eventually. He glanced at her, gauging her reaction. And I thought you might like a proper sewing room. You're always clearing your work from the table for meals. Dorothea set her sewing aside. You'd build me a sewing room, if you'd like one. Noah kept his tone casual, though his heart was beating faster. Mrs. Tanner mentioned you've been taking in some mending from neighbors. Thought you might want to expand that if it interests you. It was true Dorothea's skill with a needle had become known among the scattered homesteads, and women had begun bringing her work, paying in eggs or butter or occasionally coin. She enjoyed the work and the chance to connect with other women, isolated as they were for much of the winter. I would like that, she said softly, very much. Then it's settled. Noah returned to his sketching, adding lines to represent the proposed addition. We'll start after the spring work is done. Dorothea watched him, this man who continuously surprised her with his thoughtfulness. In Philadelphia, she'd known men who viewed women's work as trivial, not worthy of consideration or support. Yet here was Noah, planning to build her a room dedicated to her skills, encouraging her independence even as he protected her. Noah, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. When he looked up, she continued, I think it's time you moved your things to my room if you still want to. The slate and pencil froze in Noah's hands. Are you certain? Dorothea nodded, a blush spreading across her cheeks but her gaze steady. I'm certain. That night, for the first time, they shared a bed as husband and wife. Noah was gentle, patient, guiding Dorothea through her nervousness with tender words and careful touches until her fears melted away. Afterward, as they lay entwined, Dorothea's head on his chest and his fingers combing through her unbound hair, she realized with a start of surprise that she was happy truly, deeply happy in a way she'd never expected to be again. What are you thinking? Noah murmured, feeling her smile against his skin. That when I stepped off that train 6 months ago, terrified and desperate, I couldn't have imagined this, she replied. That what began as a practical arrangement would become. Love, he suggested when she faltered. Dorothea raised her head to look at him, her eyes shining in the dim light. Yes, she said simply. Love. Spring arrived in a rush of green across the prairie. As the land awakened, so too did the Xavier Ranch, with new calves wobbling alongside their mothers and seedlings pushing through the rich soil of the expanded garden. Will thrived, growing plumper by the day, his dark hair forming tiny curls and his laughter becoming Noah's favorite sound in the world. True to his word, Noah began construction on the house addition once the most pressing spring work was complete. Neighbors came to help raise the walls, a tradition of the frontier that ensured no family had to manage such large tasks alone. The women brought food, making a celebration of the workday, while the children played under the watchful eyes of the oldest girls. Dorothea moved among them confidently, no longer the uncertain city woman but a capable ranch wife who had earned their respect. Will rode on her hip, charming everyone with his ready smile, and if anyone remembered the circumstances of his arrival, they gave no sign of it. You've made quite a life here, Abigail Tanner commented as they set out lunch for the working men. Hard to believe you've been here less than a year. Sometimes it feels like I've always been here, Dorothea replied, adjusting Will as he squirmed to reach for a bright tin cup on the table. Other times I wake up surprised to see prairie instead of city streets outside my window. Do you miss it? Philadelphia? Dorothea considered the question seriously. I miss certain conveniences, being able to buy fabric without waiting for the mercantile to order it, having a doctor nearby. She smiled as Will finally caught the cup he'd been reaching for, gurgling in triumph. But no, I don't miss my life there. Everything that matters is here now. By midsummer, the addition was complete, a snug bedroom that would someday be Will's, a bright sewing room with built-in shelves for Dorothea's materials, and an expanded kitchen with a new cookstove that didn't smoke when the wind was from the east. Noah had insisted on glass windows throughout, an expense Dorothea had initially protested until he'd quietly mentioned how her eyes lit up when flooded with sunlight. On the evening they officially declared the construction finished, Noah surprised her with a final touch, a sign for the door of her sewing room, carefully wood-burned with the words, "Dorothea Xavier, seamstress." "You're becoming known for your work," he explained as she traced the letters with her fingertips. "Thought you should have a proper sign like any professional." Dorothea hung the sign immediately, her eyes bright with pleased tears. That night, after Will was asleep, she showed Noah exactly how much the gesture had meant to her, their lovemaking filled with a confidence that had grown between them over the months. As autumn approached again, bringing with it Will's first birthday, Dorothea began to suspect what the occasional morning sickness and tender breasts confirmed. By October, she was carrying Noah's child. She kept the knowledge to herself for 2 weeks, savoring the secret while making certain before sharing the news with her husband. She chose a quiet evening, after Will had been put to bed with the wooden horse he refused to sleep without. Noah sat at the kitchen table, account books open before him as he tallied the year's profits and losses. Dorothea placed a cup of coffee at his elbow, then sat beside him, her hand covering his. "I have something to tell you," she said, unable to keep the smile from her voice. Noah looked up, instantly alert to her tone. "What is it?" "The family we started last November." She placed her free hand on her still flat stomach. "It's growing again. By late spring, we shall have a brother or sister." For a moment, Noah simply stared at her, his expression blank with shock. Then he was on his feet, pulling her into his arms with a whoop of joy that surely would have wakened Will had the child not been such a sound sleeper. "A baby," he kept saying as he spun her around the kitchen. "Our baby. You're pleased then?" Dorothea laughed, steadying herself against his chest when he finally set her down. "Pleased?" Noah cupped her face in his hands. "Dorothea, I'm ecstatic. Another child to love, one we've made together." He kissed her then, pouring all his happiness into the gesture. When they separated, Dorothea rested her head against his shoulder. "I never expected this," she admitted. "When I left Philadelphia, I thought the best I could hope for was safety, a name for my child. I never imagined I'd find a true partner, someone who would love Will as his own and give me a second chance at happiness. And I never imagined that watching a pregnant woman step off a train would be the luckiest moment of my life," Noah replied, his voice rough with emotion. "But it was. You and Will, you've made this house a home. You've made me whole in ways I didn't know I was broken." The winter of 1879 passed more comfortably than the previous one, with the improved house keeping out the worst of the prairie winds and the certainty of their feelings warming even the coldest nights. Will took his first steps on Christmas Day, lurching from Noah's hands to Dorothea's outstretched arms while both parents cheered his achievement. By March, Dorothea's pregnancy was obvious, her belly rounding beneath her dresses. Unlike her first pregnancy, marked by fear and shame, this one brought only joy and anticipation. Noah was endearingly attentive, insisting she rest when tired and enlisting Jenny Wilkins to help with more of the household chores as Dorothea's condition advanced. Will, now a sturdy toddler with Noah's confident stride if not his blood, seemed to understand something important was happening. He patted Dorothea's stomach gently, repeating "baby" with solemn concentration, one of the dozen words he'd mastered. In late April, as the prairie erupted in wildflowers, Dorothea went into labor. This time Noah was prepared, sending for Mrs. Tanner at the first contraction and having everything ready well before the midwife arrived. Will was sent to stay with the Tanner's daughter, who had a son close to his age, while Dorothea labored. The birth was quicker than Will's had been, and by sunset, Dorothea held their daughter in her arms, a pink, perfect girl with a dusting of auburn hair that matched her mother's. Noah sat beside them on the bed, one arm around Dorothea's shoulders and the other hand gently stroking the baby's tiny fist. "She's beautiful," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "just like her mother." "What shall we name her?" Dorothea asked, looking up at him. "It's your turn to choose," Noah considered for a moment. "Elizabeth," he said finally, "after my mother, Elizabeth Xavier." "Elizabeth it is," Dorothea agreed, smiling down at their daughter. "Welcome to the world, Elizabeth Xavier. Your brother is going to adore you." And Will did adore his sister, showing none of the jealousy they'd feared. He treated her with the same gentle care he showed his precious wooden horse, patting her head and bringing toys to lay beside her, even though she was far too young to play with them. As spring ripened into summer, the Xavier family settled into new routines around the baby. Dorothea's sewing business continued to grow, with women coming from as far as Salina for her skilled work. Noah expanded the cattle herd, buying additional grazing land from a neighbor who was moving back east. The ranch prospered along with the family, each season bringing new growth and opportunity. On a golden evening in September 1880, almost 2 years after Dorothea had first arrived in Kansas, the family sat on the front porch watching the sunset. Will played at their feet with wooden blocks Noah had carved, while Elizabeth slept in Dorothea's arms, her tiny face peaceful in slumber. "I received a letter today," Dorothea said, breaking the comfortable silence. "From my sister in Boston." Noah raised an eyebrow. "Good news, I hope. She's finally coming to visit, next month if the weather holds." Dorothea adjusted Elizabeth's blanket. "She writes that our parents ask about me, about Will." Noah reached for her hand, knowing this was a difficult subject. Dorothea had written to her family after Will's birth, receiving only a cool acknowledgement in return. Her sister had maintained contact, but her parents had remained distant, hurt by what they viewed as their daughter's abandonment. "Perhaps this is a first step toward reconciliation," he suggested. Dorothea nodded. "Perhaps." "My sister says they were surprised to hear I'd given them another grandchild so soon." A small smile played at her lips. "I think they're beginning to realize I've found happiness here, that this wasn't just desperate flight." "And have you," Noah asked, suddenly serious, "found happiness?" Dorothea looked at him, this man who had accepted her at her most vulnerable, who had loved her child as his own, who had built her not just a house, but a life filled with purpose and respect. She thought of the day she'd stepped off the train, pregnant and terrified, and how he'd declared without hesitation that their family started that day. "Yes," she said, squeezing his hand. "More than I ever dreamed possible." Will chose that moment to toddle over, arms raised to be lifted. Noah scooped him up, settling the boy on his lap, where he immediately began playing with the buttons on Noah's shirt. "Pa," Will said clearly, one of his favorite words, then pointing to the setting sun, "Pretty?" "Yes, son," Noah agreed, his voice suspiciously husky, "very pretty." As darkness fell over the prairie, the Xavier family remained on their porch, bound together by love that had begun in the most unexpected circumstances, but had grown strong and true with each passing season. The mail-order bride who had stepped off the train pregnant, and the cowboy who had claimed her and her unborn child without hesitation, had forged a family and a future that neither could have imagined alone. In the journal Dorothea kept for Will, she wrote that night, "September 15, 1880, my dear Will, today you called the sunset pretty, and your father's eyes filled with tears of pride. You are growing so quickly, becoming a real little person with thoughts and opinions of your own. Your sister watches your every move with fascination, and I have no doubt she'll be following you everywhere as soon as she can crawl. 2 years ago, I arrived in Kansas with nothing but hope and fear in equal measure. Today, I can hardly remember what it felt like to be so afraid. Your father taught me that love doesn't always come in expected packages or follow conventional paths. Sometimes it begins with a simple declaration, our family starts today, and grows into something so profound, it changes everything. You may not remember these early days, but I hope someday you'll understand just how much you were wanted, how completely you belong. From the moment your father first saw you, still growing beneath my heart, you were his son in all the ways that matter. Our family's beginning may have been unusual, but the love that holds us together is the most natural thing in the world. With all my heart, your mother."